Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Fish Farmer's webinar on feed and feed strategies in association with TidalX AI. I'm Robert Uchtram, editor of Fish Farmer, and with me are Christina Langarnet of Tidal, Frank Wig Rendall, and Anne-Kristin Ulset of Salmon Farmer Nova Sea, Stephanie Horn of Blue Food Performance, and Paddy Campbell of Biomar. We'll be looking at how to ensure that the feeding regime is efficient and sustainable, and how to meet the nutritional feed needs of the fish. Among the topics we'll be discussing are alternative proteins, the need to conserve wild fish stocks, the drive to net zero carbon emissions, and how the latest technology can ensure that the feeding program is manageable, effective, scalable, and supports the health and welfare of the fish while mitigating environmental impact. So to begin with, Christina Langarnet is Senior Sales Executive with Tidal in Norway. Christina, can you tell us something about your role at Tidal and how Tidal's technology helps farmers to manage their feed? Oh, I think you're muted, Christina. I can't hear you.
That was a bad start,
How's
but
that?
okay. So thank you so much for having us on. So my role at Tidal is really about working closely with salmon farmers, both in Norway and internationally, to understand their production goals and challenges, and then helping them get the most out of our technology. So I come from a background in aquafeed, having worked 8 years with Biomar before joining Tidal. So always worked very closely on how feeding decisions affect growth, fish health, and farm economics. At Tidal, our technology is essentially an underwater camera and AI system that acts like a super feeder, you could say, working alongside the farmers. So the camera follows the fish underwater, and then the system detects appetite signals and uneaten pellets in real time. And so based on that, it can adjust feeding autonomously throughout the meal. And then what this means in practice is that farmers can feed closer to the real appetite of the fish, not overfeeding, not underfeeding, which we have seen leads to better growth. It improves the feed conversion, and it does give less feed waste. And importantly, operators are still in control. So the system provides them with daily insights and tools to make more precise decisions. So it's a lot about combining our technology with human expertise to manage feed more efficiently, more sustainable, and more profitably.
Thanks, Christina. Frank Wig Rendall is production coordinator with Nova Sea. Frank, can you tell us about your role and about Nova Sea as a company?
Yes. Yes, as you said, my name is Frank. I work as a production coordinator. That means that I'm working closely to the feeding of the salmon. I'm watching and analyzing results, and I'm also working with a lot of new technology for us, like Tidal. And about the company, Nova Sea is one of the largest producers of farmed salmon in northern Norway. Started in 1972. A man named Steinar Olaisen started with 1,200 salmon smolts. They were flying the salmon with a seaplane to the island of Lovund. And in just a few days, only 174 of them survived. So but his reaction was very positive to that. And he was celebrating that I can do this. This is working. So today, Nova Sea is produce over 12 million salmon per year. And as I was saying, it's a small island called Lovund. We still have our main office at Lovund, and we're very proud of that. Yeah.
And how have you found the value of artificial intelligence and Tidal technology in the context of feed?
Yeah, because of we haven't been quite satisfied with our growth in the last years. We are always looking for possibilities to produce our salmon in a better way, not only for the salmon but also the people. So in the last years we have installed a lot of equipments and cameras in the cages. And we're testing a lot of systems just because we like to produce, as our slogan says, the finest salmon. Yeah. And our main goal then is to increase the growth. And we believe that technology could help us and help the people that feeds the fish to do it in a better way.
That's great. Thanks, Frank. Anne, you are a feed coordinator responsible for feed at Nova Sea. Can you tell me something about what that role entails and some of the challenges of that role?
Yeah, so I'm stepping in here last minute. We actually were supposed to have a feeder here. But my role is, as a feed center responsible, is to make sure that all the feeders manage to feed all the different pens and all the locations they have to satiation every day without actually wasting any of the feed. And yeah, as Frank was talking about, reducing the time it takes from we put them in the sea until they have reached the weight we want to slaughter them at. So I am not involved in the feeding on a daily basis directly, but previously I worked as a feeder or feed technician, and I still man a station now and then if needed. So hopefully I'll be able to cover his role and answer the questions he would have gotten.
Thanks, Anne. Stephanie, you're a co-founder and lead analyst with Blue Food Performance. Can you tell us a bit about Blue Food Performance and what it is your company does?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So Blue Food Performance, we're a team of sustainability consultants focusing on seafood, obviously. And our main focus is to help aquaculture become more efficient, resilient, and ultimately more sustainable. And we do this by providing clear data-driven insights into how different inputs, especially feed, can affect like productivity, profitability, and ultimately the environmental impact. So we work with aquaculture producers, aquaculture processors, aquafeed producer, really any company along the aquaculture value chain, and help them improve their production practices and ultimately their bottom line in a way that reduces environmental pressures.
And what are the key issues you particularly find around feed and aquaculture, Stephanie?
So there's probably several key issues when we're thinking about commercially produced formulated feeds. Probably cost is one of the major issues for the farmers themselves. And that actually drives most of the environmental impact as well. So yeah, the cost of formulated feeds, we're driving environmental impact when we're using high amounts of expensive feeds. And cost is quite volatile, so prices can change, and that really eats into farmers' margins. So if we're talking to farmers, cost is probably one of the biggest key issues. If we're thinking about processors, it's maybe the efficiency of the feed, so the efficiency of the ingredients that are used within the feed, making sure that those ingredients are actually getting into the fish, so the feed is actually fed appropriately and it's not being wasted, and that feed actually in turn translates to weight gain for the fish. So they make sure that the feed is efficient. And myself, I personally think that sustainability is one of the key issues. So finding alternative ingredients and strategies to reduce pressures on wild fish stocks and land-based resources is quite a key issue for myself as well.
Thanks, Stephanie. And last but not least, Paddy Campbell is Vice President of the Salmon Division with Biomar, one of the leading aquafeed businesses. Paddy, could you tell us something about Biomar and about your role in the company?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Biomar is a Danish-owned international feed company. We produce around about 1.6 million tons of aquaculture feeds for a variety of different species, actually 40 odd different species around the world. My responsibility is for the salmon area, which principally is our businesses in Norway, where we have 2 feed mills, Chile, where we also have 2 feed mills, Scotland, and more recently in Tasmania. The salmon division of Biomar make up around about 1 million tons of that 1.6 million tons. So it's the biggest species that we have in our portfolio, and of course Norway is our biggest market, followed by Chile, and then Scotland and Tasmania. My background is I'm a fish biologist by background, a nutritionist. I've been in Biomar for 27 years, and a lot of technical R&D roles. So very much into the sort of nutrition, fish performance biology, and of course, feed is a really important topic to be discussing here today. How we can use it more efficiently. I think that the bigger picture here is, if you look at how feed is converted commercially, feed conversion ratio, we call it economic feed conversion ratio, which includes any mortality biomass. Out in the real world, the commercial farms, I guess the industry in Norway and Chile and Scotland are talking about feed conversion ratios around about 1.3 to 1.4 in commercial situations. But we know that if you can feed really efficiently, really reduce mortality in fish, you could probably get near a 1. So this is kind of the topic of how to get more efficient feed conversion. Of course, feed conversion is very much linked to growth rate of the fish. So the more efficiently you feed the fish to closer to satiation, the faster they will grow, which is really important for the farmer, and the lower the feed conversion will be. You're also minimizing the time the fish are at sea, which means that you're also, by definition, reducing the likelihood of mortality events as well. So I think this is the sort of critical part of the thing. And of course, for feed companies, it's super interesting to have the technology that Tidal has developed, so we can actually work with our customers, looking at their data, helping them interpret the data, and really get involved ourselves, because feed is a very important economic part, as Stephanie's already highlighted. It's expensive. The sort of finite raw materials available for feeds if aquaculture is going to grow in the future. So making the most out of how we use it is super critical.
Thanks, Paddy. So if I can throw in a topic to the panel generally, what is the development of AI? I mean, we're hearing a lot about how AI is transforming pretty much every industry. What's the development of AI made possible specifically in feed management that wasn't before? And I guess it makes sense to start with you, Christina. What things just kind of weren't possible without applying AI technology?
So maybe what I could say just briefly for those who are not familiar with the Tidal technology. So unique to Tidal is that alongside the camera system, it also comes with an autonomous winch. So the winch actually enables the camera to patrol the entire pen at different depths. And the camera device then has a top camera, which is what we use for the feeding. And by doing so, through the AI technology, we can actually see and understand the fish in real time, wherever the fish is positioned in the pen during the meal. And if you think about traditional feeding and manual feeding today, it's quite based on the operator's experience, and often you base it on what you've experienced before, how you've seen the fish to be responding to your feeding, and then also what you believe to be true. There is a lot that goes on at a feeding station or at a centralized feeding center, and in reality, a human being can only watch so much at once. So in this sense, autonomous feeding, it does come in as a very handy tool for optimizing your feeding efficiency. So with AI, we can now continuously analyze what's happening underwater. We can monitor the appetite signals, the swimming patterns of the fish, and also pellet detection. And based on this, the system will control the meal and make sure that it's continuously in real time adjusting to the fish appetite. And the system, of course, will not get tired or distracted by anything that is going on around the feeder. And minute by minute, it will be adjusting the feed rate. So I would say, the real shift is that farmers are no longer guessing or relying on routines. So they're working with data and insights that are objective and consistent. And that means that they can feed closer to true appetite, which will reduce waste. And what we've seen is that it's optimizing growth in a way that simply wasn't possible before AI.
Any other thoughts on that? How are people seeing AI changing the way that this is managed?
Maybe Frank, you want to share some experience?
Yes.
Yes, we used the technology with the Tidal for about 6 months now, and our experiences is that the system is reacting much faster to feed more or less, as Christina said. So we have. Yeah, we feel that the system is helping our feed people to do a better job. So and we've seen the results for these 6 months, and our growth has increased in this period. So we can call it a success.
Yes. Would it be fair to say that traditionally there's quite a lot of guesswork and uncertainty when it comes to feed, because you're dealing with fish that are obviously under the surface. It's not necessarily easy to see what's going on. So what are the kind of what are those kind of data points? What's that information that is particularly useful to know when it comes to managing your feed? What's the kind of data that you really need to gather that's maybe hard in traditional farming to actually find?
Yes, the short answer is a lot of data.
Yeah.
We need we would like to see how many lice, and see is it full of lice. Then we have a problem, and of course we would like to see how big the fish is, as yeah, yeah, and Christine, you must help me.
Well, for the feeding itself, it's the amount of fish, the size of the fish, and also temperature, because all of these parameters, they will affect how the fish eats and how quickly it grows. So yeah, I would say it's a lot of guesswork, especially in the early days where you didn't have a camera at all, and you just looked at how much the fish was jumping when you started feeding, and then fed it a set amount. depending on this table with these parameters plotted in. So now before the AI, we have cameras, we move around, and we base the decisions on the small window you see inside the pen. With the winches, you start to get a little larger area, but you still, as a human being, you can only adjust the camera in one pen at a time. But with the AI, it runs around on its own and therefore will always follow where the fish is at this moment. So it really gives you a much better way to adjust every single pen independently, regardless of if you have 1, 10, or 21, as we have as a max limit here in our feed station at the moment. So in the future, maybe one feeder can feed 40 pens, but we'll see.
So obviously the information about the fish, but as you said, information about the environment as well, and what's happening in the sea around the pan is also important.
Yeah, we are also using other environmental parameters to adjust the feeding, like the oxygen level and the temperature. So that will also be a part of affecting the feeding decisions that the system is making. And I think what I have found really good to hear from those feeders who've been feeding autonomously is that whenever there is a bit of a more challenging situation, or you could see there is a lot of pellets falling through, then the system will take down the feed rate. So that's a good thing, because that means that the farmers feels trust, because the autonomous system is making the same decisions that they would do themselves if they saw a certain level of pellets falling through. On the other side, what they are potentially surprised about is when the system then, after being at a set feed rate for a certain amount of time, no pellets seen, it will then turn up the feed rate. And it will do so quite aggressively throughout the meal. And this is the good thing, and this more surprising thing. And also when it comes to using words like an aggressive feeder, and it's an aggressive feeder in a positive way, because you as a human being, you might think that if the fish is starting to show reduced appetite, you want to keep it at a low feed rate for the rest of the day or the rest of the meal, whereas this system will continuously try to test the fish. And then, because it's not going to base itself on any biased opinion about the fish having a poor day or anything like that. So I think there are sort of like both decisions that the system will take that can surprise the feeder, but also it makes decisions in a direction that is reassuring them that this is actually also doing the right things in those situations where it's important to take down the feed rate.
Stephanie, from your point of view, what's the kind of data that it's really useful to collect when looking at the efficiency of feeding or the effectiveness?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, we know that feeds, especially at salmon farms, can make up maybe like 70 to 80% of the cost, but also 70-80% of the environmental footprint as well in terms of carbon emissions. And so when we improve the feed efficiency, when we make small improvements to the FCR, that can really make big improvements to the overall sustainability of the farm itself. It can reduce the carbon footprints quite dramatically when you consider how much of the feed actually translates to the carbon footprint. And so reducing the waste is probably a really good data point that you want to focus on. So making sure that you are catching those pellets that are falling through, and having a system that really optimizes those types of strategies that can catch those pellets when they're not being eaten is a really good way to make sure that the waste is reduced and therefore the FCR is being optimized. So yeah, I think that's one of the data points that this type of technology can really help with.
Paddy, you mentioned that Biomara is selling feed to salmon producers in very different parts of the world. It's one species, Atlantic salmon, but growing in Tasmania, Chile, Norway, Scotland. Are conditions and practices very different in different parts of the world, or are they very similar because we're dealing with the same species and you have to look after it in the same way? Or are you finding that there's a very different approach if you're looking at sort of Chile compared with Norway?
It's a great question. I think the first thing is the environments are very, very different in the different farming locations. So kind of the extreme would be to compare kind of northern Norway towards wet and overseer farming in terms of winter temperatures at sort of 1, 2 degrees, but to Tasmania, for example, in the summer where they're dealing with temperatures above 20 degrees in summertime. So the environments are very different for sure. And of course, salmon will behave very differently in terms of feeding depending on temperatures. So that's the sort of fundamental of salmon farming. And so differences in environment, difference in genetic stocks, and of course, from a feed perspective, differences in raw materials as well. But the overriding thing is to have nutritionally balanced diets that are designed optimally for that environment and that fish, and that's kind of what our job is as feed companies. The way salmon are fed is different. I think in Chile, the industry is very much feeding what they call micro meals, where generally they have the personnel on the farms for a period of times because they're quite remote often. So they're living on the farms and doing shifts in and off, which means that they can be there for the whole, in the summertime, they'll be there for sort of 14 hours of daylight. So they're feeding what we call micro meals, many, many meals all the time. And different populations of fish are coming up and getting fed and satiated. And so they believe that's the best way to deal with their environment and get the most out of the fish and get the best FCRs and growth rates. I would say in Scotland and Norway, it's more kind of meal feeding, when generally you're feeding in a way sort of 2 meals, one larger meal in the morning, one top-up meal in the afternoon. And then in wintertime, when the day length's decreasing, you can't do that physically. So it comes down to sort of one meal. I think the most important thing of how anyone is feeding is to make sure you're feeding the fish to satiation. That's the critical thing. And that's why sort of tidal technology is so interesting, because it really makes, in a way, you feed to satiation with no feed waste. And once you've fed to satiation with no feed waste, you're not getting an environmental impact from the feed waste because there isn't any. And because your retention of nutrients is at the highest point when you fed to satiation, so your protein retention, your energy retention in the fish is absolutely optimal. Highest growth rate, lowest FCR, you're getting the best use out of the fish, out of the feed at that point as well. So lots of different ways of doing it, but fundamentally getting to satiation is kind of the critical bit.
And Christina, are you finding that people are using your technology slightly differently in different parts of the world? Do you have to kind of adapt a strategy to the particular environment that your users are
Yeah,
encountering?
absolutely and definitely. And I think that's one of the benefits of the technology, that you can do exactly that. So it's kind of like a self-driven car. We don't have that I think it's only in the US they have that so far, but we all have cruise controls on our car, I guess. So I mean, it's the same thing. You just need to set the parameters that you car to sort of go by in the settings, and then it will do what it's told to do, adapting to its environments. And it's basically the same thing with the system. You set the different settings attuned to your specific location, to your specific conditions, how many meals you would like to feed, not the length of the meal, but the size of the meal, and then the system just goes to work. So it's quite cool like that.
So we're getting some great questions already in from our online audience. One of them actually kind of relates to this, which is, what would be a good feeding strategy for winters with several weeks under 2 degrees Celsius. I guess we're looking at places like northern Norway, Iceland, the kind of places where you get extremely cold winters. How does that affect feeding strategy? Maybe that's something Frank or and Kristen, you'd want to answer.
Actually, we don't really get it that cold right here.
Right.
Luckily, maybe a day or two, but not for weeks on length.
Yeah.
But I've been talking to colleagues further north, and they can actually feed to satiation one day and then wait a day or two even before they feed again, because the everything goes so slowly with the fish's metabolism in these temperatures. So it's simply not ready to eat again until then. But maybe Biomod, for instance, deliver feed up there to someone who does it differently. I don't know. You might be better to answer that question.
Oh, but no, I think the feed rate is related to the water temperature, and the metabolism of the fish is very, very low at low water temperature. So they simply, they'll eat a very, very small amount of feed. But the maintenance of the fish, or the nutrient required to maintain, or the maintenance ration, is also very, very low at low water temperature. So you can still gain weight. It's just much slower. And the efficiency of the conversion can be very good at low water temperature. So it's not like they're converting at a very high rate. They just slow down principally. But of course, when the temperature or the photo period starts to increase, then you've got to be absolutely ready to increase your feed rate. And I think sometimes you can see that maybe some farmers are a little bit slow to do that. It's normally triggered actually more like photo period, increasing day length than water temperature. And the fish are starting to be ready to increase their feed rate. And if you don't catch that properly, then you're losing out on some growth rate. So I think that that's a really sort of critical thing coming into sort of early springtime, from winter into spring, to make sure that you're really catching that growth potential coming out. And it's the same in Tasmania, when I said the temperatures get too high, they simply will stop feeding, actually. And in Tassie, there's probably sometimes a month, even a month and a half, where the fish are basically flatlining. They're not really feeding much because the temperature's got too high. But then when it drops and they come back on the feed, absolutely make sure that you're feeding the fish to satiation.
So the fish themselves, they kind of moderate their behavior to suit what the temperature is doing to their metabolism, basically.
Well, their metabolism is related to the environment, the temperature. I mean, that's what drives fish. Different to terrestrials, where we're all set at 36 degrees, and
Yes.
So yeah, quite different.
Yeah. And anybody else got any thoughts on cold water feeding? There's another question that we had, which is animal welfare. We've been talking about sort of feed efficiency, but what about welfare? How does AI technology help to maintain the welfare of salmon, which clearly is an important issue? I know Norway has been looking at the level of mortality among farm fish and looking for ways to improve that. How could AI help that? Any thoughts on that?
I guess we also have welfare, a welfare product integrated in the same camera system. So if you're feeding with our system, you also have the welfare product. So then you can use the data insights from the Tidal camera to get data on, for example, the wounds on the fish. Which of course can be very useful and helpful information. We also do scale loss, which is relevant. We have scalp damage, we have cataract or eye cloudiness, as it's also can be called. And then based on this, you would have to use the data insights to make sure that you're optimizing your production and collaborating through the different departments, both with your veterinarians and with the people feeding the fish. Of course, if you know that you're going to need to treat the fish, it can be very relevant to understand the skin condition of your fish, etc. So it's all about how you are able to utilize the data, because we do collect a lot of data through the system. So definitely very relevant as well. And I think also what makes it interesting then is because if your fish has an underlying health condition, feeding can also be compromised to a certain degree. So that can mean that the fish is not converting as you would be expecting from the feed, or it can also mean that the fish appetite is reduced. So there is a lot of insights that you will just get on what's going on with your fish and what's going on in your pen that you can use to optimize whatever kind of measurements or precautions that you feel the need to do in order to either make sure first and foremost, you need to take care of the fish welfare. If that means that you need to treat them, or if it means that you need to harvest them earlier than what you had planned for, I think in general, it's taking us back to the same aspect that you have the data insights, which is again enabling you to optimize not just only feeding, but also in terms of fish welfare as well.
Stephanie, any thoughts on the welfare aspect of things? Is that something that Blue Food tends to look at?
Yeah, so we use a variety of different metrics when we're thinking about the environmental performance, the economic performance, the health and welfare performance. So yeah, we've been developing some welfare metrics that we can actually include in our performance assessments. And we know that especially in salmon farming, it's something that is a huge focus for the producers themselves, but also for the consumers. Consumers are wanting, sustainable, ethically produced food products, and that includes their salmon. So yeah, it's something that we are thinking about, and it's something that we actually include in our performance assessments as well. And I think this AI technology can really help with tracking the type of data required for doing really full in-depth welfare assessments of salmon farms, but also a load of different aquaculture systems across the world as well.
Now we've got an audience question coming on from the discussion about salmon satiation and feeding to satiation. Our audience member asks, under some situations, satiation may lead to a lower FCR without a gain in growth. Does the tidal system impose some limits to feed intake based on models for optimized feeding? So, in other words, is it just about satiation, or is there a kind of a more sophisticated analysis of that can look at it in a slightly different way, if I'm understanding the question correctly?
Yeah, I'm trying to think how to respond to it.
Mm.
I mean, I would say in general, we don't set that as, it's not the kind of target that you set when you start the meal or you start feeding with tidal. The main target that the system will be controlling or managing by, it's your set feed rate for the meal. And then, I mean, there are different settings that you set in terms of the target feed rate per minute, maximum, minimum, and then overall, how much feed do you want to make sure that the fish is eating on that particular day? So that's at the level where we are now with our technology. And then again, I mean, once the system has seen for a long enough period of time too many pellets falling through, even at the minimum feed rate that you've set, it has this ability to go into some auto stops, meaning that it will pause the meal for a set amount of time, which you as the feeder also will be controlling. And once you've sort of been through all of those auto stops that you've set up for that particular meal, then the conclusion of the system will be that the fish is not hungry anymore, or they're not taking any more pellets, so it will finish the meal. So the meal either finishes once you've reached the target feed rate of the day, or it finishes when you have too many pellets falling through and the fish not eating more. So that's basically how it works.
Thanks. I have I have actually a three questions in one as well, and again it's title related ones. We'll come on. I've got a kind of big picture question as well, but just continuing on the title system. One is, what's the time scale for return on investment for salmon farming companies? Because obviously this technology is going to cost something. So is there an idea on when that actually pays back? And the second part of that is, how close are we to actually moving from being beyond a tool for humans to help manage feed, but um, to actually achieve something closer to full autonomy for fish farms at sea. And then finally, what's the most surprising thing that's come out of people actually using the technology? So just going back to return on investment, I guess that must be something that your customers or potential customers are asking, because I think that's the first thing anybody looks at when they're asking about technology.
I mean, I can't give a general answer to that one, because it all depends. It depends a lot on how many systems you choose to use, how many sites you choose to use, and it's complex, right? And I also like to say, and maybe it's not the best sales argument, I don't know, but at the end of the day, it's just a tool. It's basically just a tool. So it's a lot dependent on how you use it and your ability to actually get the most value out of it. So there is a lot of gains that can be used in an ROI calculation in terms of feeding. We've mentioned some of it already. There is all of these efficiency and automation gains that you can get. You can improve your growth and your FCR, which of course will either grow you bigger fish with less feed. It can give you less time at sea, which again can of course make sure that you get more fish throughout the cycles. It can mean that you can avoid certain treatments operations because the fish is spending less time at the sea. There is all these elements linked into sustainability. That's of course also really important and becoming more and more important, especially I think in general, both to big farming companies and the small ones. And then you also have to, very simple thing, basically you don't have to have all the equipment in your pens any longer. Because if you do like Nova Sea did and you take out your manual feeding cameras, it's less equipment to maintain and it's also less equipment to and then this is only for feeding. We also do automatic lice counting. In Norway, we have approval from the authorities, meaning that you don't have to manually count lice anymore. Doing that at one farm, one site, it's basically saving you 1.5 days of labor. We have the welfare element. If you're combining that into sort of improving your operations, that will give you a gain. And then we also have a very good biomass estimation tool, which can be used for harvest planning, making your whole sales logistics department more efficient. So, I mean, it's a lot here, and it all depends on case by case. But definitely, I wouldn't have any hard feelings presenting an ROI calculation to any farmers, because I think definitely it's a valid business case to invest in.
And on the autonomy question, how close potentially are we to an autonomous farm that humans really only have to visit to, I guess, maintain the equipment rather than visit on a regular basis?
I think the technology is ready. I mean, the technology is ready, but we are also humans in the loop here, and humans working with the technology. And I think, I mean, it's a bit of a balance there, allowing people to both get familiar with and adapt to technology in a sensible time scale. But I think the biggest potential that we can see short time is that one feeder can feed more pens. That one is definitely really, really ready to go and to be deployed. When we will be at a point where a farm can be fully autonomously operated, I'm not going to be the one predicting that, but I think potentially a bit more of a long-term perspective for that one. Yeah, which I
And
think
then
is
finally,
good.
oh, sorry.
I think it's a good thing because I enjoy working with humans. So.
Yes. And finally, what's the most surprising thing that's come back from the field, if you like, from people actually using this this equipment?
Most surprising, but surprising in a good way, is that I've had several feeders who have told me that they are learning from the AI technology. So what they're doing, they could be feeding 2 different sites, one autonomously and one manually. So they're actually taking learnings from how the autonomous system is feeding AI and transferring that into how they are feeding manually. And I think Morten, who is the Nova Sea feeder, who has used Tidal a lot, who was supposed to be here, is one of the feeders who said that to me. But he is not the only one. So I think that is also a really nice story and experience to see that we can also learn from the technology in that sense.
Maybe I could throw open the autonomous question a bit more widely. Is that an exciting prospect? Is that something to be worried about? Maybe Frank and Kristin, if humans are less involved on a day-to-day basis, is that worrying, or is that actually something that's good because you don't have to go out at sea in bad weathers so often to look after the farms?
Well, internet connection or electricity is a big issue here.
Yes.
So even if the weather is too bad to go out for a human, if it kicks or it turns off your internet, the system doesn't work. So it doesn't exclude it completely. But as a customer here, I'd say we're very happy with the model and how it works. But I'm not 100% convinced that it's ready to take over just yet. There's still a few technical issues that needs to be seen by a human, but when it works, it's really good. We're very happy with it actually, and the way it pushes the fish and well, increase the growth. Simple as that. But with all technology, there is issues, and yeah. But the prospect of not having to send people out in bad weather with possibility of harm, it's very tempting. Yes, absolutely.
Thanks. And then moving on to a completely different question, and this is maybe one initially for Paddy. We've got a question about if you like the big picture. Clearly, farmers are very interested in their in efficiency in terms of feed conversion ratio, but should the industry be looking at a kind of a big picture aspect of efficiency as well in terms of sustainability, use of the world's resources? I mean, I know fish farmers will say that aquaculture is one of the most efficient ways of producing protein, but is it efficient enough? And is that something that BioMar looks at kind of in the big picture as well as looking at the economic considerations for customers?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we absolutely have to. I mean, I think feed is, there's lots of different quotations and on how much the impact feed has. It's, roughly, depending on where you are, around about 80% of the carbon footprint for a salmon farmer is feed. So we have to strive to find solutions in terms of new raw materials that are giving a less environmental impact. We've got to look at kind of more restorative, circular raw materials. We've got to look at where we're getting the raw materials from in terms of agriculture, the land use. If we can take our vegetable raw materials or vegetable proteins that we use in the diets from farms that have been growing the crops in a restorative way, it's really, really important. The marine raw materials, the finite amount of marine raw materials, the fish meal and fish oil, really important nutrients in those materials. Long chain fatty acids, very, very essential for keeping the fish healthy and then keeping us healthy when we eat our portion of salmon. We all know that those marine raw materials there's a finite resource. We're not taking any more out of the ocean, so we have to then collaborate and find alternatives. A great story is algal oil, for example, where companies like Verimaris and Corbion are producing these fatty acids direct from algae. So I think fermentation is going to be a critical thing, making raw materials in a economically viable way to deliver the nutrients that we want in the most cost-effective, environmentally friendly way. So that's the big kind of picture that we have to take care of as a feed company. That's why we signed on to science-based target initiatives to drive down our carbon footprint in our factories, as well as down the supply chain in terms of raw materials. So it's a big picture. But then once you've got that picture and you can actually measure it, because that's the first part, it's really important to be able to actually measure these things first in a kind of scientific way, in an approved third-party way. Then it's about efficiency, working with the customers to get the best result in terms of, as we've been discussing, growth rate FCR, because the feed is one thing, how you use it is the second part. And I think, and I see, and I hope that this is going to be more about partnership relationships with feed companies and salmon farming companies, where we're working together, because this technology is fantastic for a feed company if you think about it, because if we're integrated into this, we know what's happening on the farms, we know the biomasses, we know the feed rates. This is a super tool for us predicting what we need in terms of feed, how much raw materials we need to purchase. So the whole supply chain becomes more efficient because you have data, you have input. Simple things like that, forecasting our use of feed, our raw materials, it will revolutionize that. So we're not guessing anymore. We see what's happening on every farm. Even simple things like when to change a pellet, because we're trying to increase the energy content as the fish grows. So we've got the size distribution of the fish. We know exactly when, right, we're going from a 4 mil to a 6 mil pellet. So we know when to do it. So we're not wasting any of that possible gain because we understand exactly the biomasses, the distribution of the fish sizes in every cage. So these are just sort of standardized efficiencies. And then, of course, as we've been discussing, I think more and more will be about welfare, driving down mortality. So these high definition cameras where you can look at the fish and understand the welfare, the number of sea lice. And I think there'll be stuff on behavior as well, how the fish are behaving. We've got a lot of challenges in the environment where we've got algal blooms coming in and jellyfish. You'll see these things in the behavior of the fish before you get a problem. So I think you'll see more sort of clinical nutrition where we're adapting feeds with the customer to make sure that we're reducing risk of mortality through. So I think this whole thing with technology and AI means more partnership, a different relationship. And I think that's a really interesting approach.
Stephanie, I guess all this connects to what you were saying about sustainability. What's some of the most exciting things for you that are happening in terms of sustainability in the industry?
So just kind of making this relate back to the previous question there, in terms of the efficiency metrics that we're using. Of course, FCR is a really good farm level efficiency metric, both biological and economic FCR. It's been used for a long time. It's really good for farmers and feed producers. But we're also looking at the FIFO metrics as well. And our colleagues
This is fish
the
in, fish out. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, the fish in, fish out metric, yeah. So that is really important when we're thinking about wild fish resources that are being used, marine ingredients that are being used for the production of farmed fish feeds. When we think about the kilograms of wild fish required to produce a kilogram of salmon, for example, we tend to call that the FIFO metric, the fish in, fish out. But what our colleagues have at Bluefield Performance and across a few other academic institutions have did is actually develop a new FIFO metric. It's the nutrient and nutrition FIFO metric. So that relates to the nutrient yield per marine input. So instead of just thinking of it in weight terms, it's actually relating the nutrients that are coming out of the ocean and going into those aqua feeds and what that translates to once it's actually fed to the aquaculture product. So how much omega-3 is taken from wild fish resources and how much omega-3 can we get from the salmon pens, for example. So yeah, that's one of the really cool and exciting metrics that are being developed by my colleagues at Bluefield Performance. And I think that can really make a difference in terms of the sustainability overall when we and how we measure it of aquafeed and the end aquaculture product as well. So yeah, using in-depth data to assess that is obviously quite important. And we're collecting that data and updating our online tool that's been developed, our FIFO metric tool that's now available online. And you can actually use the data that's already been input there to measure the FIFO calculations, the FIFO result of your feed or your aquaculture product. So yeah, I think that's one of the exciting innovations and metrics that are being developed in terms of feed and aquaculture sustainability.
Thanks. I've had a couple of questions kind of connected with each other. One specifically from somebody who was interested in catfish, and one generally about other species. Is this system, I mean, as you can tell from the fact that it's such a huge percentage of biomass output, there's a lot of attention paid to salmon, which is a hugely important species in aquaculture, but there are a lot of species in aquaculture. Is this kind of system for managing feed, is that applicable to other species, and is that something that's being actively looked at? Christina, is that are you looking at kind of going beyond salmon to with how this would work for things like tilapia, etc.?
So what our models and the technology is developed for, it's fin fish. So it basically means that as long as we have the fish in question or the species in question to train the model, that's how it's been done. So it's sort of like shelf goods in that sense. But at the moment, what we are offering for right now, it's Atlantic salmon. But we are definitely also looking into more species. Yellowtail kingfish is one of them. You have coho salmon or Pacific salmon in Chile, which is also a very big and important species over there. Rainbow trout as well, which is also becoming more and more popular to farm in Norway compared to what it has been for a period of time. And then, of course, there's also other species like tilapia, sea bass, and sea bream. We are then again coming back to a bit of the sort of the economy of scale and the return of investment, of course. So when it comes to species like that, it's potentially a different kind of story, but it's definitely not something that is not doable. But at the moment, it is the salmon species that is our main focus right now, and that we're focusing on for the short-term development.
And Paddy, you mentioned biomass. It's about, did you say 40 species of fish around the world? So presumably there would be some interest in applying this kind of system in other species as well as Atlantic salmon.
Yeah, of course. But also, I mean, when we talk about aquaculture species, we also talk about crustacea, and we produce a lot of shrimp feed. And of course, shrimp are generally in ponds. So, and you can't see, it's not a visual thing. So actually we have a company called AQ1, which is a similar type of technology-based company. And that system that you're adapting the feeding of the shrimp is based on acoustic. So as the shrimp forage around and feed, they make a noise. And when they're taking a pellet and eating a pellet, they make a noise. So this system is adapted to the noise that they make when they're feeding. So as they get satiated, the noise decreases and then the feed rate decreases. So technology in feeding is, I mean, there's a huge opportunity for all different species, in effect. It's just finding the right solutions and adapting them to that various species. So I think it's there's a huge opportunity. But horses for courses, different types of technology for different types of species of fish and crustacea.
I think we're getting close to our allotted time. We did have one more question about microplastics, which are obviously a big issue in human health and the environment generally, and will have an implication for aquafeed. Is that something that's on people's radar at the moment? Are there any thoughts about how to minimize the presence of microplastics in ultimately the fish that we're eating?
I think it is a hot topic. I think the authorities don't quite understand what a safe level is or that. So I think there's still work being done on that. And I mean, principally microplastics are in our marine environment. Like it, unfortunately, or it's not a great situation, but they are there. I think from an aquaculture perspective, I think things like feeding the fish differently, waterborne feeding, where you're transporting the feed in water to the farm rather than having the pipes on top and being air driven, actually reduces the level of microplastics that a farm will produce drastically. So you're not wearing down. So I think there's really interesting technologies from the salmon farming to take kind of our responsibility of reducing microplastics into the environment. So I think that's a really interesting thing that farmers are definitely looking at. There's actually a lot of, in certain parts of Norway now, a lot of submerged cage systems where they're feeding waterborne, and that's a huge advantage in terms of our reduction of microplastics. And I think generally, in terms of, it's a complex topic, generally in terms of the raw materials we use, it's the marine raw materials that there'll be more of a challenge with microplastics going forward. So utilizing alternative raw materials, really, really important. But it's a topic that I think we're defining more as we learn more.
Well, thanks, Paddy, and thanks everybody. That's been a really interesting session. We're clearly in the process of a revolution in the way that fish farms are being managed. It's something that Frank and Christian and their colleagues are discovering at Nova Sea, and is clearly being kind of rolled out across the world as well. And it kind of holds out the prospect of approaching that elusive 1-to-1 feed conversion ratio, which farmers would dearly love to achieve. And obviously a lot of other benefits in terms of our environmental benefits. If there's no wasted food, then that certainly helps the state of the environment as well as helping the farmers economically. It's really interesting to see just one more way in which artificial intelligence, this sort of this kind of next phase of the industrial revolution, as some people have called it, is changing aquaculture. So I'd like to thank our panel, Christina Langarnert of TidalX, and Christian Ulset of Nova Sea, Frank Rendall of Nova Sea, Dr. Stephanie Horn of Blue Food Performance, and Paddy Campbell of Biomar. For participants in the webinar, I invite you to leave your feedback using the form that will appear after the webinar ends. And if you've missed some of this or you'd like to see it again, there will be a recording of this webinar available on the Fish Farmer website shortly. And our next webinar, taking place on Wednesday, the 8th of October at 1:30 UK time, is Making Waves, bringing a game-changing product to market in association with Onda. And in this one, we'll be looking at the pathways and regulatory hurdles required to bring a product from the development stage to its introduction to the market. So I hope you'll join us for that. But in the meantime, that's it for us today. And thank you very much for joining us.